Hello and welcome to the Building Sciology Potty, where we talk about better buildings to live and breathe in. I'm pretty excited about today's guest. Let me introduce you to Dr. Nicole Bijslma. Nicole is a leading expert in environmental health, building biology, and the health impacts of the built environment. She founded the Australian College of Environmental Studies in 1999 and is the best-selling author of Healthy Home, Healthy Family. With over 30 years of experience in health and academia, her research focuses on how environmental chemicals and wireless technologies affect human health. Nicole is passionate about educating people on creating healthier homes and workplaces, and she is my teacher for the mould courses I've been studying. So let's get into this really cool interview. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, Nicole, thanks for joining me today.
Very welcome. Always looking forward to chatting about something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. So take us back to the start of your journey, 25 years ago, I believe. Is that right? You started this building biology journey?
Yes, 1999, 25 years ago, exactly right when I started the college. So it was before that I started to investigate how our homes were making us sick.
Yeah, 25 years. That's a lot of time to develop some expertise. So tell us how it started. Like what spurred you to go into building biology? Let's get a bit of history.
Well, I started the building biology industry in Australia, and it has started for two reasons. I was working as a clinician at the time, a naturopath and acupuncturist, and noticing a certain percentage of my patients with asthma, allergies, chronic fatigue syndrome, autoimmune disease were not getting better by changing their diet and lifestyle, giving them a bag full of herbs or supplements. And many of them, by the third consultation, will be going, I think I've got mold in the house. What do you think about that? Or I'm sleeping near a meter panel. Do you think that's an issue? I thought, well, I didn't really think much of it until we moved into our first home around the same time. And within 2 weeks, my husband and I developed insomnia. Didn't even think the house was an issue. We just weren't sleeping well. We were waking up tired. Within 12 months, I was 30 with my first child and miscarried at 11 weeks. And then went on to have 10 miscarriages in this house and started to reflect back on the fact that everything went pear-shaped moving into the home. Then realized we were sleeping next to the meter panel, that there was a European wasp nest in close proximity to the bedroom window, and a dowser. I got a dowser to come in. So he said there's significant geopathic stress underneath the master bedroom. And Parks Victoria were regularly spraying pesticides because we were on the boundary of the Yarra River, and we were right near a very busy T intersection, even though we were in Warrandyte, which is a beautiful environment, probably one of the nicest places, I think, in Melbourne, closest state national park to the city of Melbourne. But we were on a T intersection, so I thought this can't be a coincidence that everything went pear-shaped. So I started to look at electromagnetic fields, and there were two studies at the time to show that increased exposure to elevated magnetic fields could increase risk for miscarriages. And I thought, that's an interesting coincidence. So I said to my husband, we need to get out of the bedroom and get to the back bedroom, which was reluctant to do, but we did. And next time I fell pregnant naturally with twins. We didn't qualify for IVF, by the way, because I got pregnant easily. And we went everywhere, recurrent miscarriage clinic at the Royal Women's. No one could help us to figure out why I was miscarrying, and they excluded all the obvious pathology. So it was just a matter of trying to figure out what was going on. So by the 10th, I made it my mission to find out why, if I couldn't have kids, why is it that we were miscarrying, given that medicine was unable to give me an answer? And I'm like a dog at a bone, so I'll just spend my life finding there's always a reason why people get sick, always. So I just kept looking at it and told my ex to get to the next back bedroom, and had 3 under 3. They're now teenagers. Shoot me now. Beautiful, but it is challenging. You've got kids the same age, I believe. So
I do.
It's a matter of, for me, I went into naturopathy to, make the world a better place. And I know that's really pie in the sky stuff, but I wanted to get to the cause of the problem. And I came out going, we're really treating symptoms, a bit like medicine, and that's not what I signed up for. So it's been a very long journey of 3 decades since I graduated as a naturopath, to really look at why are we so sick. I mean, more than 50% of the population, adult population, have a chronic disease. 40% have 2 chronic diseases. And so when I started to research this, it became really apparent to me over many years that environmental chemicals, man-made electromagnetic fields, mold, is having, and allergens are having a huge burden on chronic diseases And I would say that environmental exposures are probably one of the number one causes of chronic diseases, not genetics. We know that very clearly in the literature because, genes don't change. With those gene variants and detoxification pathways have stayed for generations, but what has changed is our toxic load has dramatically changed in the last 5 decades. And we know autism has increased 4,000-fold since 1931.
Wow.
We know neurodegenerative disorders like Parkinson's were virtually non-existent pre-farming, 1950s. There are so many diseases that have dramatically escalated, and a lot of it seems to be associated with environmental chemicals, especially pesticides is probably my number one worst chemical. And of course, the introduction of electromagnetic fields has what I would suspect has a synergistic effect in terms of enhancing the permeability of blood-brain barrier, affecting people's sleep. So I recently published a randomized controlled trial on the impact of a baby monitor on healthy adult sleep, and it was statistically significant, which was horrifying. Like I see that in my work in my building biologist, so creating the building biology industry, but to actually get the stats, I mean, it took 7 years from ethics to get it published in a high-end journal, to see that a baby monitor in a Wi-Fi enabled device causes significant sleep problems is very concerning and something that very few people have an awareness of.
That is crazy. I did see that come through the other day, last week on your newsletter, the link to the article, and I haven't read it yet, but I did sort of scan it. I mean, every family that has a baby these days is going to have a Wi-Fi activated baby monitor.
Did you
Pretty
have a
much.
Wi-Fi? Did you have a baby monitor?
Well, I did, but that was a million years ago. So mine was like,
Hard.
yeah, it was a hardwired baby monitor. But tons of friends of mine use their mobile phones and iPads and things to monitor their children.
Yeah.
So you
And
only had to move bedrooms, and you were no longer affected by. So, two questions: your meter box was next to your main bedroom at the time, and
bedhead.
your bed head. Because actually, one of my kids we got a smart meter installed when I moved into this house, and her head is on the other side of the wall to the smart meter box. And so I think I need to change that. So you only had to move bedrooms. So the distance away from that meter box changed how it was impacting you.
Yes. Look, at the same time, we sent our bloods to a US clinician who had a good success rate with miscarriages. And he said something's impacted your immune response. Essentially, your immune between your husband and you, his sperm wasn't that great. And
So a few factors.
yes.
Yeah.
And my immune system was attacking the fetus as an foreign agent. So ironically, by the time we got our bloods there, we didn't have to go to the US. And for him to assess it, the day he was meant to have that phone call with me at 5 o'clock in the morning, because he's based in Chicago, he died 2 hours before. And I remember ringing the clinic going, I've missed a phone call. He hasn't rung. What's going on? She goes, I'm so sorry. Allenby has just passed away. He was 74.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, oh my God, finally someone who may be able to explain why I'm miscarrying, and he's just died on us. And I walked into my husband. I said, you're not going to believe he died on us. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, I can't. I said, you know what? F the universe. I'm going to have kids no matter what it takes, no matter what's going on. I'm going to find out why we can't have kids. It was
Yeah,
like,
wow.
instead of I could have gone one of two ways. I could have gone into depression, or I could have gone, F it, I'm going to figure this out now. This is not okay. This is the universal having a joke, and I'm going to sort it out. I don't know how, but there's always a reason why people are sick. So there's a whole other back end story to that.
Holy moly. And then you were like, and then I'm going to start a college and I'm going to teach the whole of Australia how to avoid the problems I had to face. Like, that's next level. Like, I like educating people. Like, part of my job is to educate people about healthy homes and building science. But starting a college, like, why did you start a college?
Well, I didn't aim to do that. So I was lecturing naturopathy at the time for about 12 years at Melbourne College of Natural Medicine in nutrition and history and philosophy of natural medicine, which I utterly loved, and trained over a couple of thousand students then. But then, of course, had all these miscarriages and started to research at the same time in electromagnetic fields and environmental causes. And when I looked at the US EPA's website during the miscarriages, I'm going, oh my God, there's so much data here on air quality. Why didn't I learn this in my double degree? You know, I've studied naturopathy 4 years. That was an applied science course. Then I did acupuncture degree for 4 years. And I went to China to do more training in acupuncture in 92. Why didn't we address any of these environmental issues? And I just spent 10 years, much to my husband's frustration, off my own back, researching to find out how much evidence is there in this field. And as I was teaching my naturopathic students, they're going, Cole, you need to do a course in this, because this is, here I'm trying to teach a nutritional lecture very quickly so I could quickly get onto the environmental stuff. And they just kept saying, why don't you do a course in this? So I thought I started doing courses in it. And then by 2005, got it nationally accredited, and went to the US to do the building biology course. And it was pretty average because it had been translated from the German course 20 years before that. So it was old, it was outdated, and it was all American based. So I literally came back after spending 10 G's there with a piece of paper and the 25 principles, and I got engineers and PhD consultants to pull the nationally accredited building biology course together, and has been running it ever since 2005.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you had a teaching background before this. So you didn't just go from naturopathy, like as a consultant, and just start a school. You had a background in teaching.
Yeah, look, I was very lucky because in my first year of naturopathy, I did a massage course. And then the next year, I was only 19 because I wanted to get through uni and earn a pretty good income and get into clinical practice straight away in massage initially to build up my patient clientele while I was studying naturopathy and acupuncture. Like, it was 40 hours a week, double degree. It was crazy, plus 3 jobs. And the college said to me, our Oriental massage teacher has just pulled out after God knows how many years he was there. Can you fill in? I thought, God, I've only done tweener, like the acupuncture tweener as part of my acupuncture degree. Sure, I'll help out. And so from 19 onwards, I started teaching adults. So I've been teaching for 30 years, adult learning. Yeah, so it's just sort of, I was very fortunate that I had those opportunities early on, and it just built up from there.
Wow. Okay. That's awesome. So I'm grateful for you. So the second question I have, which I didn't get to before, is you were talking about geopathic stress. Could you explain what that is, please?
The geos, earth, pathos means disease, like pathology. Pathos is disease arising from the earth. So there are sacred sites and also sites around the earth that have unusual anomalies. We call these sacred sites, and people go to these sites because they uplift, they either enhance their energy or they do the opposite. Von Pohl was one of the first researchers in the 1920s and 30s to look at cancer rates in various villages throughout Germany and found that there was elevated levels of geopathic stress. Examples of geopathic stress could be fault lines, ley lines, geomagnetic lines, all of those sort of things. It's very esoteric, probably the most esoteric thing we teach at the college, because there's really no scientific device you can use apart from dowsing rods to pick this up. But when all else fails and you've checked for mold, you checked for electromagnetic fields, and someone has a weird autoimmune disorder that doesn't seem to be based on stress or emotional trauma, then geopathic stress is where we often go to. And often we're looking for signs in the environment, like bees, wasp nests, bees nests, termite mounds. You're looking for ivy. So certain plants thrive with geopathic stress. Certain animals thrive with geopathic stress. So you're looking for signs in the environment that is indicating that there could be geopathic stress anomalies in those areas.
So bees and wasps are attracted to those areas.
They'll put their nests where there's areas of geopathic stress. So fault lines, for example, is where you've got rocks coming together and causing what we call the piezoelectric effect, where they're coming together at such pressures that they're emitting actually frequencies directly above them. And if you sleep or spend time above that, it is thought to cause adverse health effects, especially immune dysregulation. But there's very little in literature on that. I mean, I love my Feng Shui, but I also love my building biology. And of course, I've done my PhD on environmental exposures and chemicals and EMFs on health. But I also love the esoteric, because ultimately, when I started the college, I wanted to create environments that people could walk into that will support their mind, body, and soul, that, to me, your house is like as important as your diet and your food and the people you surround yourself with. It should be something that when you walk in, it's like a vitamin shot. You feel you're not just protected from the weather, but you're also supported on every level of your being. But unfortunately, as I started to walk into lots of people's homes, it became really apparent that, yes, clutter is an issue, etc. And colors and furniture placement is a nice thing. Most people have got serious physical issues going on in their home, like water damage and electromagnetic fields and air pollution, which we now know is having massive ramifications for cancer risks and respiratory disorders in most Western countries. In fact, most people would be shocked probably that Australia's the pollution in major cities often exceeds the World Health Organization's guidelines.
Yeah. That's I know that's a very serious issue in Australia. I was want to go back. You said a lot in that last thing there. We talked about mold. You talked about what were they? There's three things you mentioned. Oh, clutter was one of them, and there was another one. But you've actually got a subject in your course for clutter. And when I saw it, I was like, what's clutter got to do with anything? And then it dawned on me, of course, if you've got a cluttered home, it's probably going to be like less clean, and there's much more risk for all the little dust mites and mold to grow in a cluttered home.
Absolutely. Clutter restricts airflow.
It didn't even occur to me. I was like, oh, and Feng Shui was the other one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it dramatically increases your exposure to allergens. So wherever there's dust, there's going to be allergens. And as you know, in my course, carpets are the archaeological dig site of the entire house because they've got everything in them. And on the dust, you've got chemicals, your semi-VOCs, you've got your dust mite, you've got your fungal particulate. You've got your chemicals attached to that, so your solvents and your perfumes and your flame retardants, which is a big problem in a lot of new carpets. And the reason why so many cats have hyperthyroidism is because of the flame retardants in the carpets, and very few people know that, let alone doctors know that about that in patients. So carpets and clutter, clutter is a big issue because it's impossible to clean, especially if you can't see the floor. And it's very difficult for me to do my job if I can't moisture map the floor or get a good visual, etc., because it's impossible to clean. And cleaning is a really important part of establishing a healthy home.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So feng shui is also a topic which a lot of people think is woo-woo. Now I've been hearing the term woo-woo a lot lately, so I'm going to dive into the feng shui. So could you tell me about the relationship between feng shui and a healthy home, please?
Well, building biology is more what I would call modern feng shui. So building biology focuses more on the physical parameters that could impact mental and physical well-being. We've mentioned allergens and electromagnetic fields. We've mentioned, dust mite and mold and all those sort of things. Feng shui is more color, more the textures, more furniture placement, more why is it that I don't study well in this room? Why, when I walk in this space, I can't sleep in the bedroom? It's the more subtle things like, when someone has an argument and you weren't present when it happened, but you walk into the room and it's like the air cuts like a knife. There's a lot of subtle things that we pick up intuitively because we're intuitive beings. We tend to be quite rational in the way we educate our children, but we're actually, especially kids, are very intuitive. So if things don't feel right, like for example, when you look for buying or renting a house, you walk through the front door and you go, something about it's not right. It just doesn't feel right. And you can't rationalize why it is. That's the study of feng shui. Why is it in a straight road you have multiple car accidents? That's the study of feng shui. Why is it that the same business goes in that shop goes bust time and time again, regardless of the business that moves in? That's the study of feng shui. It's quite esoteric, but to me, it really helps, in being intuitive and also, which everybody is. It's just that they're, so busy using their rational mind that they don't realize and have not enhanced their intuition like a lot of children already have. To me, that's what feng shui is. Walking to a space where you go, in this lounge room, I can actually sit through a whole movie and feel comfortable. I could sleep in that bed and wake up feeling refreshed. I could study on that desk and be really productive. It's that understanding and that connection, like you have with people. Some people you connect with, some people you don't, and sometimes you can't even rationalize why that is the case. It's the same with spaces. Spaces are powerful, and unfortunately, they are very much neglected because we focus a lot more on our nutrition, which is good, but our homes to me is just as important, as I mentioned, as our food, as the people we surround ourselves. It's not just a form of shelter. It has a huge capacity to impact people's mental and physical health. And certainly, the lighting can make dark, cluttered houses nearly often synonymous, from my experience, with people feeling more depressed or anxious. Not that that's the cause of depression or anxiety, but it certainly can contribute to it. And we now know lighting has a huge ramification on people's mental health. That blue light suppresses melatonin, which is important for sleep, most important neuropeptide as an anti-cancer neuropeptide. And our lighting that we're using, especially our LEDs, are a big issue, especially now that ADHD affects 10% of the population and autism has increased significantly. These kids are so sensitive that even the lighting is having a massive impact. So there's much we can do by having an understanding of these parameters, whether it's the lighting and the electromagnetic fields and all these other things that can have huge ramifications for helping our kids sleep and being more healthy.
So what is your favorite topic in your line of work? Because mine is mold, because I'm in the building science game, but what's yours?
Look, I have to say mold.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't
And
it?
the reason why I love mold, because it answers many of the questions I had 30 years ago with my naturopathic patients, going, why aren't they getting better? Why have they got these weird autoimmune diseases? I see quite a few women with multiple sclerosis that start in water damaged buildings, and I look at the literature and going, why isn't anyone asking these questions? So I know with testing water damaged buildings, and every person that I train, like yourself, that's going to have a massive effect on enhancing the community health, because you'll see many clients who you'll test their buildings, or at least give them advice when they're at the building stage how to prevent condensation of mold, and that can save their marriage. I see a lot of
Absolutely.
families that have been devastated by water damage, where their gene type is such that they're far more susceptible than their partner. They're often spending more time in the water damage than their partner. So their partner may not have a understanding or empathy to go, my wife's lost her mind. And actually I can validate she probably has, and this is the pathology behind it. But there is hope, and this is what's causing and triggering that, and this is what needs to be done to fix it. So mold answers many of the questions I had 30 years ago with tricky patients with autoimmune disorders and chronic fatigue. We definitely know it's probably the number one cause of chronic fatigue. EMFs would also play a role, definitely multiple chemical sensitivities. So that's why I dedicated my PhD to, people with environmental sensitivities, and the need to upskill clinicians to diagnose this, and to have more people at the ground level to actually go and properly test their buildings to see what's going on.
Yeah, I don't think that I have, any sort of I don't think I have SIRS, but I definitely have some very unexplained symptoms that I've had my entire life, including electric shocks is a massive one. I get electric shocks constantly, and tingling all over my body that seems to be getting worse. And I've been to neurologists and all sorts, and no one's ever been able to pinpoint it. So, every time someone tells me they've got a pain or some sort of illness, I'm like, have you got mold in your house? It's sort of like the first thing I think of now to explain an unexplained symptom or a chronic illness that they've never been able to get a hold of.
Well, electric shocks often come because there's an issue with antidiuretic hormone, which governs the water in your body. So what happens, especially, it's common with clients who have SIRS, chronic inflammatory response due to mold illness, that 60% of them will have issues with antidiuretic hormone, which means they're often thirsty, they're often urinating frequently, and they get electric shocks simply because they're dehydrated. So there's more salts on the surface, which means when they're touching things, they're actually getting more electric shocks. So there's actually pathology behind that. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got SIRS, but it's normally symbolic that ADH is actually being impacted by that. So there is science behind that. And the classic thing is they go to the doctor, especially if they have excessive thirst and lots of urination. Doctor suspects there's diabetes, they get tested for that and it's not there. Then the first thing I'd be looking at is potentially water damage in their car or their home that's eliciting those symptoms.
Yeah, the car was an interesting one. I had a prac on the weekend, so we had we had I've been doing my mold testing subject since the middle of the year, and on the weekend we had our prac, and there was a girl there who had a really bad mold issue in her car. Um, I've never heard of a mold issue in a car before. That's an
Yeah.
odd, a different place to have a mold
Yeah,
issue.
no, I've heard it quite a few times, and I had a car dealer once coming through the course going, Coles, it's not unusual to leave the windows open accidentally when they're in the car yard and get a rainstorm event.
Yeah,
So
right.
it's not unusual, and that's why it's important to ask in the history, how old is your car? Did you get it second hand? Is there any smell? Some older cars you can't actually service the air conditioner, so it could be a source of microbes and fungi. That's not unusual either. So unfortunately with CERS, it's a really delicate. They need to get a second-hand car because of the chemical smells they can't cope with.
Mm.
Can't be too old that the air conditioner can't be serviced. You know what I mean? So it's this delicate dance that they have to modify their life in order to try and live in a Western culture.
And it's the same with furniture. Like you get a secondhand couch that's full of mold
Don't get a
spores.
second couch.
Well, what's the option? Like you get a secondhand couch that's full of mold, or you get a new couch that's full of VOCs. Like,
That's right. So what I would say is to all my CERS clients and chemical sensitivity is to get a couch that's been on the floor for 6 or 12 months. So
the
that's
demo
had
model.
gas,
Yeah.
and then allow it to, stay as long as it can. If you do put it in a garage or whatever, allow it to outgas during hot days outside, so it's not outgassing those semi-box inside the house. So
Yep.
there are ways around that.
It's time for a quick sponsor shout out. Today's episode of the Building Sciology Potty is proudly brought to you by our amazing sponsors, Enduro Builders and Climasure. A huge thank you to these incredible businesses for supporting the podcast and helping us spread the word about better buildings to live and breathe in. Your support makes this podcast possible. Please head over to their websites and follow their social pages. So let's move on to my favorite topic, mold. So it's a bit of a biggie in the building biology world, and it's also a big deal in construction because we have a lot of issues with, particularly during winter, with construction mold on timber frames. So there's a lot of confusion around how to remediate mold on a timber frame. It's a lot of people go into forums and they're asking, oh, my timber frame's gone moldy, what do I do? And then there's all this keyboard warrior advice about how to fix it. So what's your advice on the best way to fix a moldy timber frame during construction?
Well, look, because it's semi-porous and it's porous, so the fungal particulate is going to be in there. You can't just get a HEPA vacuuming and microfiber cloth, which is the standard procedure for condition 2 surfaces. So the key there is sandblasting. Blasting basically is what's needed. There are companies now that specialize in this because of what's happened along the eastern seaboard, especially up north, just specializing on timber frames and removing fungal particulate from that. So, I mean, the reality is with building, even in the past prior to the pandemic, and now that the resources have been really challenging, getting materials, and the building industry has really had a tough time since the pandemic, no doubt about that. That stick frame always used to have some form of contamination even at the mill. So, fusarium would be quite common. But of course, when you've got a delay in construction, and you've got more water more water events raining, then of course it's going to add the load to the fungal particulate. So the only way really is blasting. Either remove it, start again, or blasting. That's it.
Yeah, and we're just not going to knock our timber frames down and do it again, are we? That's just not really feasible. So sandblasting. What about is there a sealant you can put on the frames to stop the mold, the spores from spreading, or?
That's not what the S520 recommend. Encapsulation can be used in some scenarios, but it's not considered to be the best standard of care. So the problem is with soft pines, they become more challenging, especially using soft pines in humid environments in specific climate zones. not recommended.
Mm.
But it's because we have a restriction on what's not restriction, but a lack of supply for hardwood, and it's becoming more expensive. That's also another challenge for the building industry.
Yeah. So you mentioned condition two particulate, condition two mold, and you also mentioned S520. So could you please go back for our listener and tell them what those two things are?
Sure. Well, I'm fortunate to be committee member for the first Australian standard on mould, which will be coming out next year. Essentially, we're endorsing the S500, which is a textbook from the Institute of Inspection, Cleaning, Restoration Certification, IICRC, in the US that has protocols on best practice for cleaning. S500 looks at how to dry after a water event in order to prevent it becoming a mould-related problem, because as we know, with water loss, mold spores are everywhere from the Arctic to the Antarctica. It's normal in a healthy home to have mold spores, and a little bit of hyphae, etc., is normal. However, when you have a water event, what happens is it within 48 hours can dramatically increase microbial growth, and depending on the substrates that it's on, because many substrates will be ideal for mold growth and bacteria. And as a result of that, that can result in the release of fungal particulates, spores, hyphae, etc. Condition one is considered to be normal fungal ecology for that house in that environment. So that's fine, no remediation. Condition two is high settled spores, which can be picked up on an air and or surface sample. And that normally happens when you've had a water event, there's been growth, and that microbial growth has resulted in the release of fungal structures like spores and hyphae in the nearby environment. So it's contaminated a nearby environment. And that could be within the room, it could be in adjacent rooms, could be the whole house, depending on the extent of the water loss and how quickly it was dried. So the key with the S500 is to dry in a timely manner, and hopefully, within 24 to 48 hours, if possible. After that, it becomes a mold remediation issue. And that's when it goes from maybe a few $100s or a couple thousand to a lot more expensive, because the process of mold remediation is to get to the source of moisture, dry any wet materials because they can be a source of microbial growth, discard any materials that are water damaged or porous items, any items that have condition three that are porous or semi-porous. Normally you tend to throw out. There are some that are salvageable. Non-porous items you can save. So condition two is critical because you can't see it with the naked eye, and that's the reason why when people are in homes that they suspect are making them sick, that the worst times I cannot see or smell mold. And it's until I get those air and surface samples that I go, yep, your house is fine, or no, this is actually really bad, or worst case scenario, you're going to have to get out with just the clothes on your back and get into a hotel and get the insurance company involved because this is really bad. Fortunately, that doesn't happen too often, but it does happen. And I'm quite surprised the percentage of the housing stock that I'm seeing with significant water damage is so much higher than I ever imagined. So condition two is high settled spores, you can't see it. Condition three means visible mold, actual growth. There's often damp, musty odor. There's visible mold. By the time you see visible mold, you're talking about millions of spores per centimetre squared. So it's what you don't see that's an issue. To me, being in this industry for the past 2 decades, what I've noticed is that the exposure history is probably one of the most valuable tools to have as a mold testing technician, because the symptoms I see in clients who are impacted by water damage is they have either asthma, allergies, upper or lower respiratory tract infections, chronic sinusitis that doesn't dissipate with treatment, bronchitis, tonsillitis, laryngitis, otitis media, and pneumonia. So recurrent colds and flus that keep coming back and not resistant to treatment is the first red flag that there could be water damage in their home, workplace, school, or their car. It's common for kids to have colds every year, maybe 6 or 7 times, and they get over it quick. When they persist for weeks or months, that's when it becomes a red flag, especially when it's happened after a bathroom reno, a water event, or after moving into a home that potentially has significant water damage.
Yeah, we love our bathroom and kitchen renos, don't we? We love them. And people rip into their bathrooms without knowing what they're dealing with. I did it. My previous house, we ripped out the bathtub. a wall behind the bathtub, and yeah, it was the whole bottom plate was all moldy. Didn't think anything of it. My laundry ceiling was moldy. My bathroom ceiling was moldy. This is before I knew anything about it. So when I talk about electric shocks and tingling, I know I've had the house before that. We lived in Queensland with a evaporative cooler, and the couch, shoes, everything went moldy. So I've actually had, if I think back, significant mold exposure in my life.
Mm.
And
what's
there's sorry, go.
What's interesting is clients who end up with chronic inflammatory response, which is the sort of new term for chronic fatigue syndrome, is they've been in multiple water damage environments by the time they actually get sick, which shows me the body's incredibly resilient because, for them to be in one home where they got sick but hadn't been in previous water damage buildings, it doesn't exist. They've been in many water damage buildings, whether it's workplace or their homes or childhood. That would be really common in the history.
So there is a statistic in the building industry. There was a research paper done down in Tasmania a few years ago, and they determined that in 40% of Australian homes, 40% of new homes, there is a mold issue. I would say, based on my experience, it is way more than 40%, way more. And that's why I started this study, because I want to know what's going on in new homes, and I want to know what's going on in existing homes, and I want to be able to flag things for people. And I mean, when you know better, you can do better. It's a bit of a, it's what I've been repeating lately. And that goes for so many things, but in particular, avoiding mold growth in a new home and assessing it in an existing home. Like if inflammatory illnesses are responsible, if mold and mycotoxins is responsible for all of those illnesses, I mean, we're all sick. Like, to some degree, some of us are more sensitive to mycotoxins than others, but we have all you've got to do is ask somebody one question about a moldy home and they'll tell you stories. Oh yeah, my daughter's allergic. Oh yeah, this house had mold all through the bathroom. Oh yeah, the laundry flooded and we had mold. It's just
Yes.
everywhere, and not in the healthy levels, like problematic levels. And people don't know what it could be doing to their health and how to fix it.
Well, look at asthma. We're the second highest rate of asthma in the world. And, at least 60% of asthmatics are reacting to fungal particulate. And most clinicians and their doctors aren't asking about their homes. This is the thing. By the time they get to us, they've been through the whole medical merry-go-round and hopefully found a naturopath that picked it up, or it's just profound, the story they have, and often medical gaslit at the same time, which is really sad. It just adds to that trauma. But to me, if you think about it, we spend 90% of our time in the built environment, especially if your work isn't related to landscaping and being outside. So it makes sense. The longer you are in an environment that's toxic, the sicker you're going to get. And this is what we're seeing classically with especially young parents, normally the mother, with young children who's at the house, more often than the breadwinner, her partner, for example. And, because of the duration of exposure, they're often sick and they show symptoms and he or she may not. So it's very interesting to see these correlations, and it's so common. But as you mentioned, the big ones for me where people get really sick is the bathroom renovation, where they're stripping the tiles and the gyprock and the mold is hidden. And I'm always surprised how well the building envelope can contain very high levels of fungal particulate, like doing wall cavity sampling, going, oh my God, there's 700,000 aspergills, penicillium in the wall, only 200 in the bathroom. Then the builders come, ripped it off. Now it's cross-contaminated adjacent rooms, in some cases the whole house, because they didn't test, they didn't set up containment, they didn't put it under negative air or air scrubbers, and now it's just a very expensive process. If the client even discovers that, otherwise, what happens is the kids are sick and now they're at home in the environment that's created the sickness. It's very sad to see this, which is why it's become the number one course that I teach now, having the only nationally accredited course in mold testing and EMF testing, that we've had 400 people come through the course, tradies, which is great to see, to upskill them about the impact of mold. And I think they're shocked to listen to people in my course, like in your course, where you had clients with SIRS who are living in caravans currently. And it's just put it into perspective, the devastating impact it can have on people's health.
Yeah, when I first found out about SIRS, I was made aware of people living in tents in their back gardens because they simply could not be inside their houses. Like, it just blows my mind how this can impact some people. It's literally destroys lives. And, we live in Petri dishes. We're building our homes out of porous materials, and moisture laden materials because they're not being covered up during construction, or we're building with concrete. And concrete, as we discussed on the weekend, is another big one, a massive moisture source, impacting relative humidity inside and contributing to microbial growth, condition 2 microbial growth that you can't see. And it's, I was watching one of the case studies on the platform, the Moodle platform earlier, and someone came out with 2.3 million mold spores, Aspergillus penicillium, in their wall cavity. There was no visible mold. The lady was like, the homeowner was, I am convinced there is a problem with this wall. There was no water pipes in there. It was an internal wall. There was no reason why that wall should have been a problem. But when it was tested, it was massively high, and it was put down to construction moisture.
Yes, so you want to construct properly. So in terms of mold in concrete substrates, concrete slabs I generally don't find are the cause of a major mold issue. Obviously, you want them to cure, and that's always an issue when you're on a time frame in terms of the construction. It's when you have tilt concrete slab construction, walls, floor, ceilings in multi-story apartments, that if that's not dried and cured, that becomes a huge issue for water vapor, condensation, and ultimately mold. So this is becoming such a problem. And of course, there's a lot of reports now on strata, multi-story apartments, especially in Sydney, that have ended up at the Supreme Court because they're just not designed to be lived in.
Yeah, there's some study going on that I'm aware of as well on concrete, and mold risk for concrete. And people who've worked with concrete for years, they report it, literally crying down the walls of concrete, like tilt-up panels, because it wasn't cured properly before construction. It's a serious issue. So I think you've written a book, Nicole.
I have. I wrote in 2012.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about your book, because I'm going to buy a copy when the new version comes out next year.
So it's currently sold out. I started first version 2012 on healthy home, healthy family. And it was really written because when I was doing assessments at people's homes, they wanted detail, and my reports were so big, I thought, I'm just going to write a book, just give them a book as part of my assessment, because, I'm not going to go through all the sheets and the linen and the cookware and all the plastics and blah, blah, blah. So I'll write a book and give them one. And that was part of the reason, because I hate writing reports. But it sold 15,000 copies, mainly in Australia, and got a bit of leverage through the media. So occasionally, I've done over 30 television interviews as a result of the book and the issues that I've raised in there, so electromagnetic fields, mold, etc. It's currently in the 3rd edition, which is sold out, and I'm currently writing the 4th edition. But essentially, everything I put into that 1st edition in 2012 hasn't changed. All that's changed is the data in the scientific literature has exploded to validate what I thought was a problem. So all of those issues that I raised, the chemicals, electromagnetic fields, mold, it's the same. I've just gone more into detail into the 4-dog defense, conflict of interest, industry, conflict of interest, corporations, and going, what's actually happened here? And it all comes back down to, corporations have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure their shareholders are earning money, and that often comes at the cost of human health. I'm not anti-capitalist, but what I see is public health is largely a misnomer. Apart from removal of lead in petrol and better sewage system, there hasn't been a lot of breakthroughs in public health, and if anything, there've been a lot of disasters in public health. And because it takes 50 years or so to prove that A causes B, in the interim, all your kids are exposed to all these chemicals and toxins because researchers like me are going to spend a lifetime to prove that it's a problem, which is the system is flawed. And that's why I started the college, to educate people that the change is not going to happen from the top down. It's got to happen from the ground up. So by getting more building biologists out there and getting them into people's homes to educate them what's really going on and giving them good content, that was the only way that change was going to happen.
You know, I'm finding a similar thing in the construction industry. The change is not coming. I mean, the building code is changing, it's evolving very, very slowly. And some of the building science is finally being taken into consideration in regards to condensation management. South Australia has recently put a pause on the building code for 10 years. So we won't see any further developments from a legal framework perspective for a decade, which is a real shame. It doesn't stop me from doing my job though. So I will still be pounding the pavement. But what I'm finding is that the change is coming not from the building code level, it's coming from the homeowners. It's coming from homeowners who are listening to podcasts. They're getting on the forums. They're listening to the YouTubes, and they're saying to their builders, "Can you please make sure that my building has got this building wrap on it, or could you this membrane, or could you please make sure that we do a blower door test?" And there are some builders that will go, "What are you talking about?" And aren't willing to learn, and there are other builders that say that get on board and they say, "Oh, let me learn about that," and that's going to cause a divide, I think, between those who there's going to become a gap between those who know about it and are building the better buildings and those who get sort of left behind, particularly when the building code isn't forcing anyone to do anything else. So yeah, it's the drive does come from the people who are being directly impacted by these problems.
Yes, absolutely. And for me, from my experience, it's often the mothers seeing their kids being unwell or they're unwell. And we know women especially are more susceptible to many of these environmental exposures. That certainly was the case with my baby monitor study, that the cohort within 7 nights of a baby monitor, 1/3 of my participants, all women, mature age women in their 40s and 50s, developed clinical insomnia, like actual medical grade insomnia within 7 nights of a baby monitor next to on their bedside table, which is what they would do if they had a baby monitor. So definitely. So it does stem from the ground up. It takes courage to be able to, to go beyond and question everything. I think we're at a stage now. When I was younger, we had our World Book Encyclopedia, and that was our knowledge base. Now we're so overloaded with information, so overloaded with good and bad information. There's so much on social media. I've literally switched off during my PhD looking at social media because there's just so much stuff that's out there. I just cringe, that's giving misinformation. I will get back into that because I now realize I feel a responsibility to get good content out there and to, help people who are using clove for mold, for goodness sake, or doing stuff that's actually adding to the toxic burden, and to, with scientific justification. So yeah, it is an important time, and it's great to see that people are thinking outside of the square and critically thinking. You have to critically think every bit of information that's out there and who it's coming from and what are their qualifications, and who are they to say, because everyone's got an opinion. Everyone has an opinion, but do they know what they're talking about? Are they actually disseminating information that's not accurate because they haven't applied that? It takes experience to do that. And having done my PhD in environmental chemicals, looking at mold and electromagnetic fields, when I first started in the industry, I had a lot more opinion about, plugins, EMFs. Now I'm very cautious what advice I give because I know what I know and I know what I don't know. Whereas when people get into the industry initially, they have a lot of opinions about what works, when in fact that's not the case, and that's often exacerbating more problems. So it is a challenging time because we're overloaded with information, but people need to question everything and don't get it from one source. It's like nowadays, if you get a cancer diagnosis, you don't go to one doctor, you go to many doctors, as many people for a second opinion, and then you're quite shocked at the different opinion and treatment strategies. So then you can make an informed choice. Same thing, read widely, question where is it coming from, and always get a second opinion.
Yeah, great advice, Nicole. All right, well, we're nearly ready to wrap up, but there's 2 more questions I want to ask you. Well, the first one is, what should people absolutely not do when it comes to cleaning mold? And the second one is, what is the main thing you want people to know?
Oh, okay. So cleaning mold, a lot of people, if you have mold on textiles, the rule of thumb is to get rid of it. Don't clean mold off shoes and clothes. Once the mold is on the shoes and the clothes, they're gone, gonski. I find people exposed to very high levels of mold when it's on a curtain that they're opening and closing every day. So I demonstrate that to my students. I do an air sample in the room. I then get one of the students to move the curtains, do another air sample, and it goes from a few hundred spores to 10,000 spores. So that's what those clients are exposed to. So once you have mold on a porous item, discard it. You can't save textiles. I was horrified to see on a major television network this woman who's a cleaning expert show how to scrub mold off leather shoes, and that's horrifying to me because that could end up with an asthmatic in hospital with an asthma attack. So, that is not okay. When it comes to cleaning mold, do not use chemicals, do not use essential oils. You must actually vacuum with a HEPA filter first, followed by with a microfiber cloth that's been dipped in dish liquid, followed by vacuuming. That's the way the professionals do it. That's the way you should do it. So first, of course, is what caused the mold. Mold is only there if there's moisture, whether it's condensation, water vapor, or liquid water. Get to the water first, fix up the roof leak, fix up the drainage. Otherwise, you're never going to prevent it. So that's the first thing. And then vacuum it off the surface and follow it through with the microfiber cloth and vacuum again.
The HEPA sandwich, right?
The HEPA sandwich.
And the last question is, what is the one thing you want people to know?
That, look, to create a healthy home is actually quite easy. You'll see reading my book, the only thing I recommend people buy is a good vacuum cleaner, an air purifier, and a water filter. The rest is knowledge. Keep your house as clean as possible. Reduce the dust load. Don't wear your shoes inside where you track all those pesticides in. If you've got any respiratory problems, asthma, allergies, get rid of the carpets. Can make a big difference, and no fabric curtains. Your roller blinds are far better, and that can make a huge difference to the allergy reservoir. And the last one is no Wi-Fi enabled devices in the bedroom, because that could impact sleep.
Great advice. Thank you, Nicole. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Jess.
That is all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. There will be another episode in a fortnight, so if you would like to listen into the types of conversations that I have all the time, please subscribe on your chosen platform. Rate the show, leave a comment, whatever you like, share with your friends and family. I'd love for you to spread the word about the Building Sciology Potty. There's a link in the episode description where you can head to a landing page, and there are some show notes there with relevant links and a full transcript of the show as well, and also links to my socials. So if you're not already, I'd love for you to follow along there too, as I share lots of building science and building biology tips. There's also a contact page where you can send me an email or even a voice message. So if you've got questions or suggestions or guest ideas, I'd love to hear from you. I want to know what you want to know, so please get in touch with me. Thanks again. I'll be back in 2 weeks. So until then, happy healthy building.